Welcome to the Fill Your Cups podcast. A couple housekeeping items before we dive into the episode. Keep an eye out for future bonus book club episodes. This month, we're reading Everyone on the Train is a Suspect by Benjamin Stevenson, and we'd love for you to join us in reading so you can follow along when we release our July bonus book club episode. You can also head over to our Instagram to get your dinner meal plan for the week. Let us know if providing this for you is filling your cups.
In today's episode, we're going to be talking a little bit deeper today, and we're going to be really revealing some parts of us in the process. We all know that comparison is bad, and you really shouldn't do it, and that's what everyone says. But today, we're going to be talking about a different kind of comparison. We're going to be talking about the comparison to your old self and how it's really the silent killer that nobody talks about. So let's dive right in.
Okay, so what's in your cup today, Bailey?
Today in my cup is a little bit of wine. It is from Stonehouse Wineries, my favorite. What are you drinking?
You know, I was just drinking water until you showed up with the wine, and then now I have some wine. I was going to see if I wonder if we clink, if they'll be able to hear it.
Oh.
We'll see, I guess.
I think I like that.
So I know that we always want to start with what's in our cups and then start with a nice shout out. And you had the one from this week.
I did, yes. So my best friend Sophia, she texted me and told me that her boyfriend Jacob had told her and said, "You need to tell Bailey that whenever we walk our dogs, it really fills my cup." And I thought that was so precious. And I said, "Sophia, I'm putting that in my podcast." And she said, "Do it. We're so excited." So Jacob, thanks for telling us that. Thanks for thinking of us. And I love that you could think about ways that you were filling your cup this week.
Yes, if other people have ideas of ways that you're finding that you're filling your cups, please let us know. Maybe we'll give you a little shout out in the next episode.
I also want to, real quick, I did not discuss this with you, but we have to go into it. I heard from a couple people that they didn't know what filling your cups meant. They had never heard that. And I was like, I totally thought that was a common phrase.
Yeah.
So kind of, if you had to describe it in like a little sentence or two, what would you say for filling your cups? What does that mean?
Well, first I would tell them to go listen to our trailer because that basically answers it. But if they don't want to do that, I would probably like my little elevator pitch for filling your cups is ways to keep your life feeling full and satisfied with it, doing little things that drop by drop, they're making your life feel like it's overflowing with love and joy and passion or whatever it is that you want your cup filled with.
Yes, I love that. That's perfect. I hope that helps for a couple of you guys that had asked me. If not, ask me again and I will try to explain it again. Or ask Morgan because hers was really good.
Thanks. Well, I know today's topic is a little bit deeper. We're trying to we've talked about this, but we haven't told our audience yet, but we've kind of discovered that the episode ideas that we have vary between kind of these 3 episode types, and we really like the how-to or habit type episodes. So that was our first episode. And then we really like adding in a little bit of fun, just some entertainment, and that was our second episode. And then now we're into our third category, which is just a little bit deeper, things that maybe are a little bit more vulnerable, things that people maybe haven't thought about or we offer them to think twice about. Yeah. So today's...
Things that are kind of hard to talk about maybe sometimes.
Yes, struggles, things that we need help overcoming, and often we only do that by sharing with others and getting past it together.
Definitely.
So, or maybe not getting past it, but moving forward.
Yeah. Figuring it out.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I know today is a lot about how we can stop being stuck in the past and moving forward. So do you want to talk a little bit about how we came to think of this topic?
Yes. So I know that the first time I really felt like the comparison to my old self was a huge killer was I went into this year really wanting to be the best version of myself that I could. I was like, I'm 25 now. Like, I was getting really into habits and things.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to figure out all the ways I could be my best self. And I was realizing that I would feel so alone in my thought of like I'm not as good as I used to be. And I thought that was a thought that only I had, because I don't think it's one that very many people talk about. I think it's like a really vulnerable kind of thing to say, because I feel like you're almost admitting to other people that you're not as good, and who wants to ever say that? So I was talking about it with my husband at the very beginning of the year, and I was just telling him that I felt like whenever I would go on Instagram that I would just compare myself to my old self, and just I'd never felt as good, and I always felt like I was going to be judged to my old self and everything like that. And then he told me he felt the exact same way, and I was just shocked about it, because I didn't know that other people felt like that. And then you and I had a girls' night one night, and I think we were going through like old clothes or something, and you and I really got on the topic of comparing ourselves to our old selves. And I was like, Morgan, we have to talk about this. No one talks about this. And I thought I was completely alone. And now I'm finding out two of the closest people in my life feel this exact same way. So I think that that's where we realized that we really wanted to do a podcast episode about this. And I know that you had the idea already. So it was kind of like in your brainstorm devices whenever we were going over what we would maybe want to do podcasts about. And so I was like, yes, this absolutely has to be a topic.
Yeah, I think for me, it's something that I noticed is it impacts life more than you realize, because we always hear that comparison's the thief of joy, but the most typical way that we apply that is to other people. And even with, like, you talked about Instagram and social media, even with that, I feel like we talk a lot about how it can cause comparison, but typically we're talking about comparison to other people, which certainly is a thief of joy as well. Of course. But it's not something that we talk about as much when we're thinking about, what ways are you kind of dwelling on former seasons of your life that is keeping you from moving forward with the current season of your life. And I know for me, I noticed that I go through my days, and sometimes I think about things that I used to be able to do, or just like things that I used to fill my schedule with that I don't anymore. And it's hard, because when you start to evolve and move into a new season of life and prioritize different things, those priorities obviously raise up, but then something has to fall down. And I feel like for me, my issue is just having these crazy high expectations to have all of these things prioritized as number one. It's like, that's really not possible.
No, it's not.
You know, you can't be the same person that you were in every season of life up till now, and then also be moving into a different person. Just doesn't work.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about it like that, like how you're evolving as a person. And like, we're going to talk about a lot about phases of life, I think, in this podcast today. But I hadn't thought about how in every season of your life, you're getting new qualities, you're getting new responsibilities, you're getting new things about you, that it's going to be impossible to keep every quality you've had and every priority you've had up to that point, and then keep adding on top. That's just impossible.
It's a vicious cycle, because people talk about comparison a lot, but then I feel like social media did a really good job of trying to, now we don't ever, I feel like it's not as much the culture of pitting girls against each other as much as it was maybe like when we were growing up, or
definitely
comparing women's bodies, things like that. But, or even comparing motherhood, like mothers to mothers, parenting styles, things like that.
Yeah.
But I do feel like we kind of went to the flip side, where people started saying things like, the only person you should be comparing yourself is to yourself. And I'm like, I mean, I get the idea. I do love the emphasis on growth that our culture has now, rather than competing with someone else,
Definitely.
But then when you start that competition with yourself, it's a different type of dwelling on the negative. Instead of dwelling on what they have that you don't, it's like dwelling on things that I used to have, or things that I used to be able to do that now I don't, and then being critical because of that instead of because of someone else. So it's just, I feel like it really can impact people more than they realize, and because we don't talk about it that often, it's not something that maybe very many people are even aware they're doing.
Yes, I completely agree. I know that you and I are both married to our high school sweethearts. And I don't know that for you, but for me, I think the comparison really lies within my like physical appearance, unfortunately. And I just knew that I would always worry about posting a picture of us. And I was worried about the people that we used to go to high school with, or the people that we used to know, seeing a picture of me and my husband and being like, wow, she's gained a lot of weight, or like, wow, she looks really different. And it just made me realize I picked up a horrible habit, which I will go into a little bit more, but I was zooming in on every single picture of myself and inspecting every single picture of myself just to see what had changed to my old self. And I just could not get out of that mind space, and I could not leave that old self behind without figuring out kind of how to move past it.
Yeah. I actually remember that habit of we would take a photo and you would immediately double tap and zoom in. And I don't think I realized how much of a criticism it was of just yourself, but I do remember you'd like double tap and you'd start at the bottom, like shoes,
and then literally all the way
and
up.
you'd go up every body part.
Yes.
Oh, and only on yourself, really, not really on other people.
No, I would never look at anybody else. So I think they look great.
Yeah, but it's funny how, well, maybe not funny is the right word, but it's just interesting how sometimes the people in our lives can be right next to us doing something that maybe is hurting them and we aren't even aware of it, you know, and how good it is to draw attention to these types of things because I don't know if you've ever heard this, but the gift of going second. Have you ever heard that?
No.
It's like when you talk about something to somebody that is kind of vulnerable for you and a struggle for you, you are offering them the gift of going second, because if they struggle with that too, they don't have to be the first one to admit it. So I feel like it's important to talk about these things for that reason.
Definitely going to take that into my life for sure. So how can we move past this?
Yes.
What are the steps, guys? Hopefully we can give you some steps, and they are real life steps that I took in my life, and I think you did too. And we're still continuing to try to improve every day and, you know, become better versions of ourselves. But how can we move past our comparison to our old selves? Kind of, what do we think step number 1 is?
Yeah, so I feel like we have like kind of a 6-step game plan here.
We've got a program.
So yeah, step 1 is, I feel like this is kind of the classic step 1. But first you have to figure out what areas of life you're doing this in. So identifying where you're doing it in. A good trigger to see where you might be doing this in is to listen to yourself as you talk about the past and pay attention to phrases like, I used to be able to keep up, or we used to be so fun, or that was back when I was cute and skinny, or, you know, things that you're saying that are kind of, there may be positive things about the past, but things that you feel like have changed and you're being critical or negative about yourself now.
Yes.
So those kinds of phrases I feel like can lead us to show where we might be struggling with this. Like I was saying, I noticed that I do this a lot with just, I guess, my capabilities of juggling so many things in life. I feel like, especially when I was in college, I was really, really good at keeping up with, like, all my friends and all my family, and I was really, really sweet and thoughtful. Not that I'm not sweet and thoughtful now.
I was going to say, what do you mean? You're like the most thoughtful.
I appreciate that. No, it's just I constantly kind of have this stream of thoughts in my head of, oh, I should be doing more, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And I feel like part of that is because back when I had more free time, now I don't know if it was just because I was like skipping class or what, but I feel like back when I had more free time, when I wasn't a homeowner, I wasn't married, I didn't have a full-time job, you know,
these are a dog mom.
Yeah, these are very real things that are huge priorities in my life that I love and I care about.
Yeah.
But at the time I didn't have, and so I had more time for some other things. I noticed that I can be very critical of myself, where I can be like, oh, I really should have done this, or I'm beating myself up because I didn't think to do something special where maybe in the past I would have, or oh, I forgot to, you know, the other day I was going to a friend's thing and I totally forgot to grab these balloons on the way, and then it was just so goofy, and I was like, oh my gosh, I never would have forgotten that in the past, but I was working, I was dealing with, you know, my husband was traveling and all sorts of things. So I feel like when we pay attention to those phrases, and I notice this a lot whenever we take our walks. We take walks in the morning and afternoon with our dog, and I notice when I start to talk about myself, the things I'm most critical about are those types of things, and I have to be like, okay, I need to pay attention to this.
Yeah.
And figure out where this is coming from, because saying that it's really never helpful. I'm just complaining about myself, yeah. But it can bring awareness to what areas of my life I'm struggling with it in.
Definitely.
So I feel like self-expectations for me, and then also sometimes I also feel like the whole, oh, we used to be so fun, or we're no fun anymore, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like, we lived downtown for a brief portion of our young adulthood, and we were able to go out and do some drinking and go back to our apartment and things like that. And now that's just not quite as important, but then every once in a while I'm like, gosh, we're just no fun anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's, maybe that's just not as much of a priority, and it doesn't align with the life that we're building at this moment.
Exactly. So identifying where it's happening, and then that way you can lead into step number 2 of figuring out how you can kind of get rid of when those habits are taking place.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out how you can kind of limit those habits. Mm-hmm. So for me, my identifying moment was always saying, like, if I post this picture, this is what people are going to think. Or I would take a picture and I'm zooming in. That's crazy. That is a habit that I was getting into. And so the way I was able to get out of that habit was I just had to stop posting on Instagram and being okay with that. I still have Instagram, and I still love to see what my friends are doing, and I love to see what other people are doing, because that was not a problem for me. It was the comparison to my old self. So that was something I had to do. I know that some other habits can be, are you constantly looking back at old pictures of yourself? Are you constantly rehashing memories with your friends? Those are just some habits. So identify where you're getting almost triggered the most, where you're realizing that you're really having those damaging thoughts. I know that you had a crazy fact about Instagram.
Oh, yeah. In researching for this episode, I found an article that had done a study with young individuals. I can't remember what age group. I think it was like 8, maybe it was like 16 through 26 or something like that. Younger people. That Instagram had been ranked the worst social network for young people's mental well-being and causes feelings of inadequacy and anxiety, which people probably already know that. But the fact that it was ranked the worst one for mental well-being definitely says something.
Yes, and I feel like it's important to note that Instagram can be great. Like, we're using it for our podcast. Of course, we're not bashing Instagram. Yeah. We're not saying it's the worst app ever and, like, you have to stop using it. That's not what's going to be helpful for everybody. But not posting on Instagram was a big thing for me.
I think that another habit is, like I was talking about, use of just critical language toward yourself, paying attention to that and trying to stop it. Because, honestly, the things that we say do program beliefs into our brains. I mean, our brains are like computers. The more that you search something, the more that it's going to pop up. Oh, yeah. So the more that we say something or think metaphor. Something, thanks. I don't know, just popped into my brain. I like it. But yeah, the more that we say, oh, I'm so bad at this, or oh, my legs are huge, or whatever the thing is that you are struggling with, the more that you are going to believe it. So
absolutely,
perhaps you can flip it on its head. I can, instead of saying, oh, we used to be so fun, I can say, oh, I love how well we sleep these days. You know what I mean? Like, I did not sleep nearly as well. We're sitting here with wine, so of course. But I didn't sleep as well whenever I would go out and stay out until 1 a.m. and drink all night, and then probably go home and get the drunchies and eat something and then go right to bed and then wake up. I probably was not getting very good sleep. So maybe there are things that we can shift our language into having better habits when it comes to building that into our belief system. Because quite honestly, just the more that you talk about something in a negative way, the more you're going to continue to feel negative about it, the more that it's just a cycle.
Absolutely.
So I would definitely say a habit for me is paying attention to the language that I'm using when I'm talking about myself.
And flipping it around. I like that.
Yeah, definitely. I also think... I don't know where this applies, to be totally honest, but this is just a total little tangent real quick, but I was just thinking about this, that sometimes maybe the reason that we struggle moving forward is because in the season we might be very proud about something. Like, for instance, I feel like right now I'm in a season of life where I'm not struggling as much with my body image as I have in previous seasons of life.
Yeah.
But I don't want to make my entire identity about this positive body image that I have because inevitably, I'm 29, almost. Yeah. I'll be 29 next month. I'm 29. I'm going to look very different in the future. So I don't want to be so wrapped up in something like that. Or even, like I was saying earlier, with like partying, I don't want to be so wrapped up into being fun and spontaneous and life of the party when I'm drinking, because then when I move into a season where that's not as aligned, I'm disappointed in myself because I can't be both.
Absolutely. I feel like this is totally off script too, but just going on with what you're saying there, I know a while ago Mason and I were having a conversation about spontaneity. And and like impulsivity. I used to be super spontaneous and really, really impulsive.
Yeah.
And I think, and that was like a quality that was so fun about me. And we loved to be like, I mean, I could pretty much do anything at the drop of a hat. Like, you just have to ask me, and honestly, you get me a couple drinks, I'm definitely saying yeah. So we were talking at the beginning of this year, and I think we were talking about traveling, and I was talking about how, like, I don't really think that this is a good idea, like, booking this many trips and blah, blah, blah. And we realized, I was like, wow, I'm really not that spontaneous anymore. I'm really not that impulsive anymore. And I remember us having a really serious conversation and me being like, I'm worried that this is like super off script. So sorry.
Okay.
But I was like, I'm worried that if I don't have this spontaneous side of me still and like the impulsive side of me still, that like you're going to love me less because it's a less fun quality. Because now I'm like I feel a little bit less fun. And he was like, absolutely not. Like, the responsibility that you have now is so good. Like, look what you're doing for our family and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, thank you for saying that. But I really felt like I was going to be less lovable because I did not have the same quality that I had when he fell in love with me 7 years ago. Aww. You know what I mean? Isn't that sad?
It is sad.
But I was glad to have brought it up to him.
Yeah.
And once I realized that it wasn't the same. And it just shows that comparison to your old self, like talking about this whole episode, is the killer.
It really
can kill
is.
Ya.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. So since we're talking with our loved ones and partners and all that kind of leads us well into step 3, which we want you to sit and ask, is your support system helping you stop this, or are they encouraging it? Do you, when you get together with your friends and family, are you constantly rehashing old memories? Which I'm not saying in it of itself is bad.
Right. We love a good trip down memory lane.
Yes.
We love it.
Yes. But are you also talking about what you're doing today? Are you also talking about what you're excited for the future?
Do you know about what's happening in your friends' lives?
Seriously.
Do you guys know?
Sometimes I have left groups of friends who we've just known forever, and it's so easy to be like, oh, remember when? And then I leave, and I'm like, do I even know what their job is?
Literally, what do they do for a living? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just one of those things where it's totally okay to remember those things, but if you want to slowly work on changing this habit, try to help lead the conversation to the present, maybe even a little bit of the future. Ask them about what they're reading, what their hobbies are. So when you're like leading the conversation with your friends, instead of being like, oh my God, we got so wasted, being like, yeah, I just really loved last weekend. We stayed home, we chilled, we went grocery shopping, we got full night's sleep. Yes. I just love a good weekend, relaxing at home.
Yes, celebrating those different phases. Yeah. I will say that I'm like a half and half right now. Like, yes. I'm half in the phase of life where I am grocery shopping and meal planning on a Sunday, and I am going to bed at 10, and I am like listening to podcasts, and I am reading every night. But I am totally as easily also in the phase of life where it's a Saturday and we want to go out. Like, yeah. So I'm kind of like a half and half, but I noticed that on those nights when I am going out with my friends, let's say, like, I don't want to relive the days. You know what I mean? Like, I want to know what's happening in their life. And I think that you saying, like, steering the conversation into that path, that can be really hard because people, like, we love to talk about those days and we love to laugh about them and things like that, but we forget that it leaves out your current self. Like, you can't be talking about what you're doing currently if you're only talking about what you used to do all the time.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, for me, I'm still in both of those phases, and I'm still happy with both of those lives that I'm living right now, but I'm wanting to also be who I am now.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that kind of make sense?
I think it makes sense. Yeah, it kind of goes back to what we were saying about the identity thing. Like, if we are constantly dwelling on our full past identity, then we are struggling to move into the identity that's more suited to today.
Yeah.
And that identity is probably not going to be more suited to you in 3 years. But you know, that's the whole point is moving.
It's the whole point of growing up.
Yeah, and just moving with yourself instead of staying stuck. And so,
yes, definitely. This is not something that we pre-approved, but it is reminding me of, there's both an episode in Friends and an episode of New Girl. The Friends one is where they say that their old friend is coming into town, like Ross and Chandler are so excited, and Joey's like, what's the big deal with this guy? And like Gandalf's the great. Yes. They keep talking about, like, oh, this guy's awesome, and like we did this and this and this, and like they got out European money or whatever, like, so that way they could be ready. And then by the end of the episode, they're like, I'm so tired. Thank God he canceled because we don't want to do anything. They're like, guys, should we just have some warm milk and like go to the coffee shop? And they're like, yeah, let's do that. Yeah. So it reminds me of that. And then it also reminds me of, for my non-friend lovers, there's a New Girl episode where they're so excited that Coach is coming back into town.
That's right.
And they like go to the strip club and they're so excited. And the whole time Schmidt and Nick are like, we don't want to be here. We need to go home. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And they find out at the end of the episode that like Coach is going through some very real life things that they didn't talk about because they only ever reminisce on the past stuff.
Yeah.
And then so by the end of the episode, they're like, guys, we're grown men now. We can't be doing this.
Yeah.
And they move into what is happening in their life now.
That's so funny.
It's kind of reminding me of that.
Totally. Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. That's so funny.
I love it. Well, our next step we're going into is being able to celebrate the small victories. I think it's really important to say that we should not be letting the ideas of where you thought that you would be or the ideas of what you thought you would be doing stop you from celebrating where you are right now. Yeah. So, especially like with the age thing, people being like, well, I'm 24. Like, I thought that I'd be married by now. Or kind of like those moments where you're really self-limiting yourself by saying where you thought you would be. Like, celebrate where you are right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I think that this is another thing that like I was saying before, that I tend to be very critical in the way that I talk about myself sometimes. And that instead of focusing on the things that I maybe didn't get done, or things that, I forgot to do this or something like that, just looking back at the day and being like, okay, well, I got this, and that done. And celebrating the things that I did get done. And that when you get into a habit of that, you get into more of a habit of giving gratitude to yourself for all of the things that you're able to do in your present state, rather than looking back and being like, oh, well, I did all these things, but I forgot ABC, or in the past I would have had more time to do this, or, you know, whatever that is. But yeah, celebrating now helps you stop dwelling on then.
It does, and I think it can also make you, like what you were saying, if your negative self-talk over and over and over and over, you are going to believe it, and it is going to be what keeps popping up. So if you're celebrating and you can be happy for yourself and you can be proud of yourself, those thoughts will start becoming real things that you're thinking about yourself.
Yeah, and I think that this can really apply to the body image thing again, which just really as women is just such a huge thing for us. And maybe for men too, but I think
it definitely is for men as well, but I think that women probably talk about it more.
Yeah. And so I think that that's something, like, I hear older women that I spend time with pretty often say things to me like, oh yeah, I used to be your size too, or oh yeah, I used to, you know, whatever, just things like that. And I'm like, your body has gotten you through a lot of stuff in your 50, 60, 70 years, however old they are. I'm like, couldn't you just at the end of the night just be like, wow, I'm really glad that I have legs that take me places. I'm really glad that I have eyes that can see. I mean, not everybody does. So, I don't know. It's just one of those things where I have to remind myself when I'm critical of my arm fat looking a little big in a picture. I'm like, oh my gosh, my arms did so much for me today. I would not have been able to make dinner. I would not have been able to walk Edward. I would not have been able to drive my car. I would not have been able to do whatever workout I did. I would not have been able to type at my desk. Just so many different things. It's like, thank you for that little bit of arm fat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes, definitely. I also think that it's something that, like, people, you're obviously your own worst critic.
Yes.
Everyone's heard that one. But, like, using your arm fat thing, like, no one else would have ever noticed that. Or, like, when older people do say, like, oh, I used to be able to do that too, or, like, I used to look just like you, like, no one was thinking that.
Nobody.
We were not thinking about what you look like at all.
Yeah, we can dive more into this in next week's episode, I think. But I just feel like it's one of those things where we take things so personally, and we don't need to. When someone is talking to you about something that's true for them in their current life and maybe used to be true for you but it's not true anymore, you don't need to bring that up. That
so true.
There's not any point. It doesn't. Okay, I won't go as far as to say it doesn't add anything to the conversation, because in certain situations it might. But for the most part, if it's you just being negative about yourself or bringing to light that, oh, I used to be able to do that or something, yeah, that's not the focus of the conversation, you know? So let's not dwell on that. Let's look at what you are doing today.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think that if you find yourself doing that in conversations, that's one of the habits we were talking about in step number 2.
Yes, definitely.
And notice if you're doing that and recognize that if you're doing that.
Yeah.
Before we move on to our next point, I wanted to go back into the not letting the idea of where you thought you would be.
Yes.
Stopping yourself from embracing where you're at now and celebrating where you're at now.
Yeah.
Especially with that age thing. Because I know that I was born to be a mother, guys. If you did not know this about me, I came out of the womb wanting a baby. So I would always say, especially to my husband, I love you, baby, but I would always say, by the time I'm 24, I better have a baby. And if it's not coming from you, then you messed up, like, kind of thing.
It's coming from someone else.
Coming from somewhere else.
Oh
I used to say that for real. I'd be like, I didn't mean it, but I'd be like, you need to figure out how you can get your track onto my track, because this is what I'm doing, 24. And then I turned 24 and I was like, absolutely not. Like, we would talk about it and I'd be like, stay 6 feet away from me. Absolutely not. Because I was like, there's no way I could have a baby right now.
Yeah.
And now I'm 25 and, like, I'm thinking about things differently, and, like, I feel totally different. My life is totally different than it was even a year ago. And I just think back at it now and I'm like, at the time that I was 24, I could not have had a baby. It just would not fit into the life that I thought that I would have. It wouldn't fit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel like
Definitely.
saying that is important for those of you guys that might think that your age is like a self-limiting thing, of realizing, like, it's not, I don't know, like
you're making up rules for yourself.
Yeah, you're making up rules for
You're making up rules for yourself that nobody else is following. Like,
No.
nobody else. Why make up a rule? You know?
Yes.
It makes no sense.
Exactly. It's not, no one else is thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's only yourself. And, like, no, I'm sure not one single person in my life thought, like, besides maybe my mom, because she wants kids or she wants grandkids, but being like, oh my God, she is 24. When's she gonna, like, really get on that? Like, no one else is thinking that except for me.
And if they are, ew.
Yeah, I like that. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that you brought that back up. And
just had to circle back.
yes. And going into our kind of last step, which I guess we have 5 steps. I said 6 at the beginning, but we have 5. So I don't know what I was thinking.
That's
so
right.
5th and final step is reframing the comparison that's coming up into a reflection. So taking whatever it is that you are struggling with, comparing yourself to your previous self, and instead of taking it as a negative thing, flipping it on its head and making it into just a little reflection of, oh, that was really good then, now this is what's good now. Or taking what was good about that may not be true anymore today, and taking pieces of it that do still apply today and figuring out how they can mesh with that. I feel like you have a good example of that, so I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, I think that with the comparison as reflection, I think that you can really take the comparison as reflection and learn from it. And like what you just said, take the pieces and figure out where they're applicable today. Because I know for myself, like, something I think about a lot is, like, how fit I was and how in shape I was in high school, my senior year of high school. And I know that I will never be training the same way that I was then, but I can look at that time and realize, like, wow, I'm really dedicated and disciplined when it comes to goals. And also, I'm weirdly strong. And I can take that, knowing what I did then, and I can put it into my life now. So I can know that, hey, if I'm trying to make a new workout routine, how can I kind of take those abilities that I have and put it into like this new one? Or if you thought that you were going to be on if you wanted to be a journalist and now you're not doing anything in that boat and you feel really bad about that, you can remember that, hey, you loved reading. Like, maybe let's add that back in. Or you loved talking about these articles. Like, let's add that into your life somewhere. I think that can be really good as reflection, that you can remember and learn from your old self.
Yeah. I feel like looking at your past self and thinking of how maybe you're like an iteration of that past self instead of being exactly that past self. You know, or like we said, an evolution. That is not totally gone. Not every part of that is gone, but you aren't the same person. So how can you apply the things that do still make sense for you into your life now? I feel like when I was talking earlier about having just these crazy high standards for my relationships, and it's really, really important to me that people in my life feel super loved by me or super seen by me. And so sometimes I get in my head where maybe I didn't take an opportunity that in the past I would have, because I have other responsibilities now. And it's like what you said a second ago, no one's thinking about this. Like, I had something in my head that now I'm beating myself up for not doing. Like, let's say it's throwing a little surprise birthday or something like that, and I don't do it because things get away from me.
Because you have a million other things going on.
And mind you, this isn't even necessarily like for my husband or something. It's like, oh my gosh, my coworker at work. Like, like, oh my gosh, this person I met last week. No, not really. But yeah.
No, that is real for you. That's pretty real for you.
But yeah, I just think I have all these, you know, well-intended thoughts of things that I could do to make people feel loved or feel seen in my life. And then when I don't do them, I beat myself up. But instead of beating myself up about that, just thinking about, you know, okay, like, why was that so important to me? How can I make sure that that person is still feeling seen and loved? And maybe just on a different scale, you know? Sometimes I just have these crazy expectations. But so taking things that I maybe used to have more bandwidth to do when I wasn't in this stage of life, and being like, okay, what are still things that are true? I do still very much care about my relationships. I do still care about reaching out to people and making sure that they know that I'm here for them, that sort of thing. But that can look different in my world today.
Yes, absolutely.
And I'm
Life
still
is
getting
so different.
Yeah, I'm still really working on it.
So am I. I mean, it's, what is it, June? And I didn't realize this part of myself was so huge until, like, January.
Yeah.
So I've been working on this. Yeah. And it's been a long process. And I do feel like I am getting much better because I, like, figured out where those triggers were for me. So I could cut them down a lot. So then it made moving on to, like, step 3, 4, and 5 so much easier for me. But I'm still completely working on it and trying my best.
Yeah, definitely. So finding those things that you can, instead of making it a competition or comparison with your past self, making it just like a reflection and figuring out what you can learn from that. What things can you pull from that, rather than being disappointed in yourself. And in closing, I just want people to remember that, you know, you are always going to lose. It's going to be a lose-lose when you come to comparing yourself to past versions of yourself, because memories are fallible. They're not very accurate. There are so many studies on memory and ways that they can falter. And so when we're looking back at our past selves, often it's with very rose-colored lenses. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes you can look and be like, oh, I'm glad I'm past that point. But for the points that you are hung up on, that you struggle with, a lot of those times they seem better than they were, maybe. And especially those memories that we rehash all the time. We probably give them a lot more glory than they really deserve.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and so we're always going to lose if we are looking back at this rose-colored lens, really, the glory days or whatever. And it keeps us from being able to move forward, because if you're going backward, you're not moving forward, Absolutely. So I definitely feel like I just want to remind people that this is a lose-lose situation if you're doing this.
Absolutely. I think for me, my biggest takeaway is that growing up is realizing that you are not your old self anymore.
Yeah.
You should let that person be that version of you and be proud of that version of you and be happy for that version of you. But embrace who you are now and be happy and proud of who you are now as well.
So hopefully you've gotten some good ideas about how to stop comparing yourself to your past self, or even just became aware that you were doing this.
Yes.
Or feel like you're not alone. So if you did like this episode, if you resonated with it, we would love if you could leave a 5-star review on your podcast app of choice and offer some feedback. If you're not leaving a 5-star review, just don't worry about leaving the review. Just send us your feedback directly and we will take it into consideration. Yes. But only 5 stars welcome here.
Guys, be sure to tune in next week for our next week's episode, because we're going to be talking all about that victim mindset and how to stop taking things so dang personally.
Yes, this is going to be another one of our how-to episodes. So we will see you next week.
We'll see you next week. Love you guys.
Cheers.